Gender-based violence, especially violence against women and girls, is a global problem and occurs in every country and society, including Vietnam. The National Study on Domestic Violence Against Women, released by the General Statistics Office, showed that 58% of the ever married women had experienced at least one of three forms of violence at some point in their lives. 1,000 cases of girls sexually abused in a year. 87% of victims of domestic violence have not sought support from public services or competent persons. 60% of women victims do not understand the law on domestic violence prevention. Before the COVID-19 pandemic occurred, the family members went to work and did not see each other, so the number of violence cases was not much. During the time away from work to avoid epidemics, domestic violence becomes worse. Against this backdrop, the Secretary General of the United Nations urged nations to take urgent action to combat the increase in domestic violence, putting the safety of women and children at the forefront of the COVID-19 pandemic. Greetings from Sharing Vietnam on VTC10 Việt. Despite many efforts, gender-based violence still occurs daily throughout the world, including Vietnam. Gender-based violence is one of the most common human rights violations in the world today, and this problem has no social, economic, or national boundaries. So how is this happening in Vietnam when the COVID-19 pandemic has not yet ended? In today's program, we will discuss with Ms. Naomi Kitahara, the Chief Representative of the United Nations Population Fund in Vietnam. So thank you, Ms. Naomi Kitahara, for joining our interview today. The COVID-19 pandemic affects everyone in our society, from the elderly to the children, men and women. So from the perspective of UNFPA, how differently does a COVID-19 pandemic affect women and men?
Men and women are affected differently in COVID-19 situation. And it's said that women are disproportionately affected by COVID-19. I give you two examples. First, when COVID-19 happens, women's health-seeking behavior changes. That means that, for instance, pregnant women, they postpone or cancel their health-seeking appointments. So antenatal care visit, postnatal care visit, they start to postpone them and even in some instances cancel them. And this is not good because it can increase maternal mortality and morbidity. So that's one example. Another example is that the gender-based violence. In a confined environment in relation to COVID-19, and also when everybody's stress level is high due to the restrictions of movement, so stress in terms of social and economic stress are high, unfortunately, violence against women and girls tends to increase. So with those two examples, I wanted to show you that the women are disproportionately affected by COVID-19.
Just before the outbreak of COVID-19, gender-based violence with the focus on women and children was one of the most serious problems. So when the COVID-19 pandemic is happening, how did this number evolve?
You're right. In Vietnam, just like other countries in the world, it is estimated that 1 in 3 women goes through one or other forms of violence in their lifetime. And Vietnam is not an exception. And so women are greatly affected by gender-based violence. And the COVID-19 situation, unfortunately, made the situation even worse. Globally, there have been a lot of reports and evidence to suggest that violence against women and girls increased due to COVID-19 because of the restrictions of movement and also because of the social and economic stress and uncertain feelings of uncertainties. These have manifested in a form of violence against women and girls. And Vietnam also, we have reports of an increase in hotline services, hotline calls in the country. This really suggests that violence against women and girls in the past few months in light of COVID-19 have made the situation worse in Vietnam as well.
Over the past weeks, as economic and social pressures and fear have grown in relation to COVID-19, the world has seen a horrifying global surge in domestic violence. In some countries, the number of women calling support services has doubled. In Vietnam, the service providers have also observed increases over the past few weeks. For example, the Peaceful House Center for Victims of Gender-Based Violence says the crisis calls to hotline 1900969680 has increased by 20%, together with online consultations and direct support of victims of violence, and some police services have noticed more domestic violence reports.
Việc cách ly nó là cái quãng thời gian có thể trở nên rất là quý báu với rất nhiều gia đình, bởi vì mọi người có thể tận dụng cái thời gian đấy để mà hiểu biết hơn lẫn nhau, chia sẻ lẫn nhau cái công việc gia đình và vun đắp lại cái tình cảm mà trong cái quãng thời gian trước ấy là mọi người ít có cái cơ hội để mà làm. Thế nhưng mà cũng có nhiều gia đình thì nếu mà nó sẵn cái sự gia trưởng và cái bạo lực ấy, thì đây lại là cái quãng thời gian mà người phụ nữ phải sống chung với người gây ra bạo lực 24/7. Các cái cơ hội để mà thay đổi nó ít hơn, hoặc cái cơ hội chạy thoát thì nó ít hơn.
For gender-based violence against girls, this is a serious problem in many countries. However, in the context of natural disasters and epidemics, it put women and girls at higher risk of violence than usual. For example, violence by a husband or a boyfriend and other forms of domestic violence occur due to increased family stress. Women and girls also face an increased risk of other gender-based forms of violence, including sexual assault and abuse in these situations. Hello and welcome back to the online interview with Ms. Naomi Kitahara, the Chief Representative of UNFPA here in Vietnam. Over the past few weeks, as economic and social pressures and fear have grown in relation to COVID-19, how has the care and support service for victims of gender-based violence been affected?
The care and services for victims of violence have to continue to be provided. And this is fundamental, and this is something that we are advocating both to the government and also civil society organizations which are providing services for victims of violence. Even if services are available, in the environment where people's movements are restricted, it might be quite difficult for victims to travel to reach services, physically travel to reach the services. For those cases, we may make sure that the hotline services and the helpline services are available with special attention, because COVID-19 means that in most cases, people are staying at home, and so victims are actually staying with perpetrators. It means that it becomes very difficult for victims to make phone calls. You can't actually talk much in front of perpetrators about the violence. So to cater for this, we are suggesting and advising different service providers to make sure that the different communication channels are available. And those include the short text messages, emails, and so forth, so that the victims don't have to talk in asking for help at home, but with silence, and they can seek help, they can get counseling services, they can make sure that their stories are fully heard by professional counselors.
Recently, UNFPA has planned to open a center shelters for victims of violence in Quảng Ninh province. So could you share more with us about UNFPA's goals and also designs?
This center is to receive victims of violence, and it's based on the principle of one-stop service center approach. It is based on the principle of victim-centered approach. What it means is that necessary services, so it can be physical care, it can be psychological counseling, it can be police protection, it can be legal services. All essential services are available to the victims of violence in one place. And not many centers are structured like that in Vietnam, unfortunately. We do have a few shelters, but then not integrated services like that in one place. And that is because and we are promoting this one-stop service center approach because the last thing we want to have is the victimization of victims. And that happens when victims have to look for services, look for different kinds of services available in different locations. And with the COVID-19 situation also, we accelerated the launch so that the center can start to receive as many victims as possible to help them and to make sure that they can be back on track in their life in order for them to feel safe, in order for them to feel comfortable and live their life free of violence.
The UN Secretary General has recently urged all governments to make the prevention of an effective response to violence against women and girls as a key part of their national response plans for COVID-19. Do you have any suggestions on solutions to ensure the safety for women and children from the violence during the COVID-19 epidemic in Vietnam?
I think there are three key areas that we would advise Vietnam to try out to end violence against women and girls in COVID-19 situation. The first thing is, of course, communication and awareness raising activities. And this is what we do in the medium to long term as well. But then special attention has to be made in the COVID-19 situation. Secondly, services. And so, one is the shelters, and the other one is one-stop service centers that we are launching. Hotels can be mobilized and to provide safety for victims of violence. Lastly, Vietnamese government has just approved a large social assistance program to help the poor who have been affected by COVID-19, which is a very commendable effort. One of the measures which is included there is a cash transfer to help the households which have been economically hit. In providing such cash transfer support, we would advise that the victims of violence can also be catered for so that they become also one of the priority groups who can receive such cash transfer assistance from the government.
Once again, thank you, Ms. Naomi Kitahara, for joining our interview today. The government of Vietnam is actively working with UNFPA and its national and international partners to effectively prevent and respond to gender-based violence, especially in the context of the complicated COVID-19 epidemic. It is hoped that these efforts will bring positive results, pushing back gender-based violence in Vietnam. And that's all we have for this episode of Sharing Vietnam today. Thank you for watching and goodbye for now.